Thank you so much for this introduction. I'm actually honored to be standing here in front of you and with the distinguished speakers. I'm actually happy I'm going first because I know they're going to be a hard act to follow. So I've seen glimpses of their presentations. But what I want to talk about today is a little bit about research and how it relates to architecture, or more into the city planning of cities. And as you're all aware, obviously, when you plan for a city, it's not just about the design of beautiful buildings, functional and efficient, but there's a lot that goes into that as well. So basically, you've got the research, the architecture, the planning, all of this going hand in hand as you go. So there's a lot of effort ongoing all the time between academia, government, businesses, industry, to create and develop concepts, applications, and systems that will help in making cities cleaner, safer, a better place to be, more efficient, and so on. But why is there so much interest, and as of lately, a lot more interest into this that's going into this research? And really, it's more about one specific word, and that's urbanization. In my opinion, that's what's really driving a lot of this right now. So urbanization in of itself is not a bad thing. In fact, urbanization contributes to sustained economic growth, the flow of information, the combination of capital and labor, so that it takes poor places into better situations, and division of labor and so on. But it also comes with momentous challenges. So, for example, when you're in cities, in urban areas, you have congestion, overcrowded living situations, social illnesses, whether those are urban poverty, crime, violence, and so on. So how do you address those? How do you go beyond that? So for the first time since in 2007, for the first time, the urban population has actually surpassed the rural population in the world. So in 2007, more than 50% of the population of the Earth was in cities. And if you look at mega cities, these are cities with 10 million inhabitants or more. In 1990, there were 10 such cities. Last year, that number almost tripled, and it keeps going up. So the trend is there, obviously. It's going to continue to increase. And just looking back through this urban growth, in 1950, 30% of the world's population was in urban population, gone to 54% last year, and then the projections is 66% in 2050, and some reports go as high as 80% in here. Now, the issue, though, is it's a large number. We're looking at adding 2.5 billion people to cities by that time. And 90% of those will be in developing countries in Asia, in Africa. And this is that's why it's so important, right, to have the proper research into the resource allocation. This will have a huge toll on resources. So just to emphasize a little bit more, on a daily basis, actually per second, 2 people move into a city. So that's 180,000 per day. You're looking at other impacts of cities. So cities produce 80% of the carbon emissions of the world. Other things like water supply. 50% of cities' water supplies are lost due to leaking infrastructures. So there's a lot of work that has to happen, whether it's maintaining existing cities or planning for future ones. And when we talk about cities, it's no longer talking about small confined spaces, little larger towns and such. Some cities now have a GDP that is equal to an entire country's GDP. So, for example, in 2010, the GDP of Istanbul in Turkey was equal to that of Vienna in Austria. But in another 10 years, it's expected that GDP of Istanbul would surpass the entire GDP of Austria. So there's a lot of challenges, but also when there are challenges, there are a lot of opportunities with that. So the question is, how do you address that? How can you grow dynamically? How can you ensure that you don't end up with situations like this where you have expansion into ghettos, into slums, and so on? We want to avoid seeing things like this. And unfortunately, not all countries have the resources or abilities to properly plan to absorb this surge in the population in a proper fashion. So some words from an expert on this, actually. Oops. Eduardo Paes, the mayor of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro is a country that comes with its own, a city that comes with its own problems. There's a lot of issues to solve there. And he's done a fairly good job so far. And he had a few words, like 4 commandments of cities for the future. The first one he talks about is, thinking green, green, green. So really thinking about the citizens, the inhabitants of the city, saying that you need to build outdoor spaces for them, but make sure that it is accessible to them. It's not restricted, that there's a way of getting to it. Mobility and integration is very important. You need to have the ability for mass transit. Social integration is very important. You need to make sure that the society is harmonious. He has a plan to urbanize the, I think they're called favelas in Brazil, the ghettos by 2020 to ensure that there's equality and harmony within the society. And obviously technology, that's a given. You need to be able to leverage technology when it's there to be able to use that. So what's a successful, sustainable city design? You need to make sure that you have an enduring way of life across several aspects, whether it's ecology, economics, politics, culture, and so on. And so the questions you would ask is this an economically productive city? Does it rely on other sources? Is it environmentally friendly? Obviously, that's a very big concern. Does it embrace technology? There are so many things that can be done with technology. How about urban poverty? Does it cause urban poverty, or are there issues with urban poverty that need to be addressed? And how are there policies to alleviate the social illnesses that are prevalent in a lot of the cities? And finally, does it instill entrepreneurial spirit? You need to be able to engage the people in the city to actually create businesses, to foster it, and to create jobs. And so whenever there's a problem, there has to be a solution, right? So in China, they have a housing problem, so they need to have housing. And they've gone into different approaches. And with the advancement in research, and architecture and construction design, the company called Broad Sustainable Building actually got into building prefabricated modules, buildings out of prefab modules. And it's amazing. Earlier this year, they built a 57-story high-rise in 3 weeks, actually 19 days to be precise. Now, obviously, there were 4 months before in which they prefabricated all these modules and then transported them to the site where they were erected and built within 19 days. In comparison, the Walkie-Talkie Tower in London at the same time, 37 stories, took 5 years to complete. Now, obviously, there are different types of buildings, but for a problem that requires a solution, this was a pretty good innovative approach. And it's not their first. They've actually done quite a few others, and it's proved to be something that can be replicated and can be scalable. So other than solving the housing problem, it actually also comes with quite a few benefits. So from a cost perspective, it was quite cost effective in that all the parts were built inside the factory with no waste. From an environmental aspect, it was also very forward-thinking in that it actually created a reduction of 12,000 tons of carbon dioxide emission, which is equivalent to planting 660,000 trees. There was a lot less disruption in the city. It removed the need for 15,000 concrete trucks to be traveling inside the city to go to the building site. And there was no dust during the construction. It is 80% more energy efficient. And this is very important when we talk about cities with the resources that are available. And this comes with the proper insulation, quadruple pane windows, and so on. But this is also here very important given pollution, so healthier environment. It had a multi-stage air purification system that claims to remove 99.9% of air particles. But the good thing here is also it has like 7 air changes per hour, all coming fresh from the outside, reducing any risk of cross-contamination between the housing units. And it claims to be 100% better than the fresh air outside. And finally, the social responsibility. Being able to create the feeling of a neighborhood of people living together. In this building, every 3 floors had a central atrium, which was more like the communal space. People get together. You have the ramp around it. That's called the sky streets, so kind of representing the streets in a neighborhood. A total of 3.6 kilometers worth of streets. And that's where people can get together. They can do vertical farming. They can play, have more like a park situation. So how does this link with what we have here in Doha or at Qatar Foundation? With the Qatar Computing Research Institute, and we're located at the Tornado Tower, which is one of the most beautiful building designs we have here. We are part of Hamad bin Khalifa University and members of Qatar Foundation. And Qatar Foundation, there are 3 national research institutes. So there's the computing research, there is energy and environment research, as well as biomedical research. So these 3 research institutes can pretty much cover a lot of the areas that are required when you come into city planning. And to assist with that, there are several other entities such as Qatar Science Technology Park, RAND Corporation, Qatar National Research Fund, among others. So now we talked about technology, and really specifically technology is quite important. So at Qatar Computing Research Institute, we do research in 6 different areas. They're all applied computing research. So it's not research for the sake of research or just publishing papers. Rather, we look for an issue that needs to be addressed, and we go after that. One of the areas very important is data analytics. You have a flood, a deluge of data that's coming at you every single day. You need to understand first how to collect it. What is it that you need? What do you do with it? How do you analyze it? Once you've analyzed it, what do you do with that information? So from that, we're able to come up with trends and predictions. Cybersecurity is obviously extremely important, especially with smart cities and interconnected technologies. You want to make sure that all your vital industries are safe from attacks and hacking. We also do a lot of work on social computing, and that again is extremely important because it gives you the pulse of the society. You can understand what's going on, the sentiments, how things are going. So being able to look at all of the different social medias and understand what situations are arising within the communities. Obviously distributed systems, Arabic language technologies. This is an Arabic-speaking country. In order to have any automated solutions, the computer needs to be able to process the language. And thankfully, we have one of the leading teams worldwide that deal with Arabic language technologies, so voice recognition and so on, in the natural language processing. And finally, computational science and engineering, dealing in even heavier research. So finally, just talking a little bit about giving an example of this technology, how it impacts city planning. So talking about autonomous technology, it's really important to understand. This is where it's going. Now we have a lot of these autonomous technologies coming up. So we need to understand how do you implement this? What kind of data is required? What network of sensors are needed? So if you take the driverless car as an example, something pioneered by Google with a lot of other car makers that are following suit on this. There was a study made by the MIT Sensible City Lab on the urban consequences of autonomous technologies. Basically, what would a driverless car, how would that impact city design? And it was a pretty interesting study, basically looking at ride sharing as well as car sharing. So for example, the car would, early in the morning drop the kids off at school, come back, drop the person off at work, and then go take someone to do the grocery shopping and so on. And what they found is that for a city like New York, everybody would get to work on time or to where they need to be on time with 80% fewer cars, meaning they can take 4 out of every 5 cars off the road. And that's a big number. It's a huge impact for city design, whether it's from traffic congestion, environment, pollution, but also parking. Parking takes up a huge amount of land that is hardly used during the evenings and so on. And so that would also free that up. So this is kind of an example of what technology can impact on city design. So I hope this was useful and interesting, and we'll go next.